On Tonight Show, it was the most deadly domestic terror attack in American history, and yet we seem to know less about it than the time D.B. Cooper had brunch with the Loch Ness Monster. Why is that? And what is it the government is hiding from us? Plus, why has the UK been sending military flights over Gaza? I'm sure it's something positive, like dropping conflict-free chocolate bars down to the children. At least the chocolate is conflict-free. All that and a mystery special guest coming up right now. Welcome to Unredacted Tonight. I'm Lee Camp. Recently, we passed the 30th anniversary of the Oklahoma City bombing in which Timothy McVeigh drove a truck up to the Murrah Federal Building and set off a bomb, killing 168 people. It's still the most deadly domestic terror attack in U.S. history. So you might think that our lovely and caring U.S. government would want to tell us the truth about it. But nah. They have more important things to do, like make sure no people of color get good jobs. That's not fair. Like make sure no people of color without the first name Cash get good jobs. The Oklahoma City bombing is one of the most investigated and reported on attacks in American history. And yet, there's roughly 10 billion things we aren't being told. Let's get into it. We're told McVeigh's only accomplice was Terry Nichols, who was an old military buddy of McVeigh's. Oh, yeah, I should mention here that this horror show was, of course, carried out by U.S. military veterans. In fact, U.S. military service is the strongest predictor of carrying out extremist violence. In the years 1990 to 2022, 170 individuals with U.S. military backgrounds plotted 144 individual mass casualty terrorist attacks inside the United States. Basically, when you hear a report about a domestic terror attack, if you ask whether the perpetrator was ex-military, it's like asking whether they were angry. It's kind of a given. It's like asking whether that new hit drama on CBS is propaganda. Of course it is, you nitwit. They're all propaganda. Even Paw Patrol is propaganda. Anyway, we're told Terry Nichols was McVeigh's only accomplice, and he was not in Oklahoma City on the day of the bombing. So that means the only person who should have been in the van that morning is McVeigh. But as The Guardian reported 10 years ago, we don't know the identities of the other people seen with McVeigh on the morning of the bombing. Only that more than 20 eyewitnesses were unanimous in telling the FBI he was not alone. More than 20 eyewitnesses. Can eyewitnesses be wrong? Absolutely. But not normally the difference between one person and two people. They can handle that. That a 3-year-old can handle while pooping his pants. And this jives with the fact that there was an FBI sketch of a John Doe number 2 that led to one of the largest nationwide manhunts in U.S. history. Tens of thousands of tips came into the FBI and not one pregnancy. Then eventually, after 2 years, the FBI said the suspect was an error. Federal officials have officially acknowledged that the circulation of a sketch of John Doe number 2 was based on a mistake by a witness who remembered the wrong person. A mistake by a witness? I remember that manhunt. They had us looking everywhere, under our beds, in garages, inside washing machines. I got a colonoscopy, just in case. We were all losing our minds. We couldn't work. We couldn't love people. We couldn't even appreciate a nice day anymore. We were just looking for John Doe number 2. That was all that was in our brains. And now they say, oh, the dude never existed. The only time I've been angrier than that was when the medical community told us CPR no longer required the mouth-to-mouth part. After we'd already been tongue blasting corpses for 50 years? Make up your minds. Anyway, like I said, every single person who saw Timothy McVeigh the morning of the bombing saw someone with him. And then there's the fact that an unidentified leg was found in the rubble after the explosion. And they know from DNA testing that it didn't belong to any of the people who died in the blast. What? You don't want to follow up on that, U.S. government? You don't want to 23andMe that shit? You aren't even trying. Or how about Terry Nichols himself? What does he have to say?
In 2005, Nichols told them, quote, he knew the identity of John Doe number 2, but refused to reveal it. Nichols told investigators, quote, he feared for his and his family's well-being.
So Terry Nichols says there's a John Doe number 2, but the federal government says, go back to sleep, America. We'll take it from here. When have we ever lied to you? And that's just the beginning of the mysteries around this attack. Back to The Guardian, there is no ready explanation for a different Ryder truck seen by witnesses at McVeigh's motel in Kansas and at the state park where the bomb was assembled. No explanation for the other people seen inside McVeigh's motel room during the same period. No satisfactory explanation of the fact that 2 people were seen renting the bomb truck on the 17th of April. So, other than Terry Nichols, did McVeigh have any connection to some sort of group of people? Thanks for asking, Lee. That's a great question that the government is hoping no one ever looks into. There's a remote white supremacist community called Elohim City in eastern Oklahoma. McVeigh telephoned the community, Elohim City, and there are multiple indications he came visiting days later in search of recruits. This seems to imply McVeigh was either working with or at the direction of a white supremacist cult, far different than acting alone, one might say, if one understands numbers and words. What about the prosecutors who successfully got McVeigh sentenced to capital punishment? Do they believe McVeigh was alone on the day of the bombing? Larry Mackey, the number 2 prosecutor against McVeigh and the lead prosecutor against Nichols, said, if you had said to our prosecution team, anybody in the room 100% confident that McVeigh was alone, raise your hand. We would have all kept our hands in our laps. So even they say the story we're supposed to believe about April 19th, 1995 is prime cut, free-range, whiskey barrel-aged, twice-filtered, pure bullshit. On top of all that, Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, the ATF, had an office in that building, and yet none of them showed up to work that morning by 9 a.m. Yeah, they were just sleeping in late, still had on their footy pajamas, curled up with a cup of cocoa. Not unusual at all. Man, I have so many questions. If only we had someone who's been studying and investigating the Oklahoma City bombing nonstop for the past 30 years. Put out multiple books and documentaries on the subject.
Kathy Sanders?
What, Gary?
What about Kathy Sanders?
Well, yeah, that would be great. I mean, she's the one who lost 2 grandchildren in the blast and has spent every spare second since investigating it. I mean, if we could find someone like that, I think
we have Kathy Sanders on the line right now.
What? Jesus, Gary, why didn't you tell me? All right, Kathy, hello. Thanks for being here.
Well, thank you, Lee. It's good to be here with you.
Kathy, first of all, thanks for all your work on this. What you've done is amazing. I'm thinking it's fairly clear McVeigh was involved in something much larger. Can you tell us about that?
I went to Elohim City. I met with the ATF informant Carol Howe, who warned her handler in her reports that I have that these people are planning a bombing. In Jennifer McVeigh's confession to the FBI, most people don't know that she was granted immunity for ratting out her brother, but she says she was laundering $100 bills that came from bank robberies. And there's a group of bank robbers staying at Elohim City. The FBI dubbed them the Midwest bank robbers. Their funds from their robberies were going to finance terrorist activities. I've got a speeding ticket that McVeigh, a boy from New York City, gets outside the gates of Elohim City. McVeigh calls Elohim City 2 weeks before the bombing, 2 minutes after calling the Ryder Truck Company. He asked to speak to Andreas Strassmeyer. Strassmeyer was never interviewed in relationship to the bombing, and he was allowed to leave the country illegally. A year later, the FBI did a telephone interview with him. But I find that so strange because FBI found it was important to talk to McVeigh's third grade school teacher. Wouldn't you want to know? Wouldn't you want to talk to Strassmeyer?
Yeah, and he had all kinds of military training and explosives training and was connected to these white supremacist groups. Anyway, if you add that up with the fact that over 20 eyewitnesses saw 2 people that morning, clearly this was more than just McVeigh.
I haven't talked about this before, so it'll be the first I've talked on this show. I've got a Secret Service document that was generated May 1st, 1995. It's 126 pages long, but the 2 paragraphs that are significant to me, the agent that's writing this report says, the security video shows the Ryder truck pulling up to the federal building and then pausing 7 to 10 seconds before it resuming into the slot in front of the building. The next paragraph that I've taken out, security videotapes from the area show the truck detonation 3 minutes and 6 seconds after the suspects, plural, exited the truck. To me, that's significant. And the trial judge put the 22 security camera videos that were around the building under seal. They're still under seal today. There's been an ongoing fight to try to get those videos released.
Yeah, so there's video, witnesses, and now Secret Service documents saying 2 people were in that truck. I wouldn't be surprised if there's drawings, painting, maybe a sculpture of more than one bomber. It's just ridiculous. Something else important is that there was another plot against the building, that same building, 12 years prior in 1983. The plot obviously never happened, but did the group who was plotting that have anything to do with McVeigh? He asks knowingly.
That's right. The FBI raided the CSA compound. That's the Covenant, the Sword, and Arm of the Lord.
Another white supremacist group.
Yes. And at the sedition trial of one of its members, it was brought out that these people were planning to blow up the Murrah building. And it was out of retaliation for the death of Gordon Call, one of their members. What's really odd then is Richard Snell, the one of the leaders of the CSA, the one that was on trial. He was executed in Arkansas on April 19th, 1995, the very day of the Murrah bombing.
Yeah, the same day.
The same day. And the prison watch log notes that inmate Snell watched the coverage of the Oklahoma City bombing and he smiled and chuckled. And his spiritual advisor, Robert Millar, leader of Elohim City, was with him. And when Snell was executed, Millar took his body back and buried it at Elohim City.
So pretty clearly, tons of white supremacist involvement. But why would the government want to cover up the full plot unless either they just love protecting white supremacists, not that far-fetched if you know your U.S. history, or the government was somehow involved in the plot?
10 years after the bombing, Terry Nichols made known to me and to some others that there were some explosives hidden under his house. And the FBI did not find them when they searched the house. He wanted the box of explosives removed because he wanted to have independent forensic testing done on the box. He said it would prove that Roger Moore, who was Tim McVeigh's buddy, he followed him around at gun shows. There's a lot of history there, but it would prove that Roger Moore's fingerprints were on it and that he's the one that supplied the kinestick that was used as the detonator for the Oklahoma City bombing. And this was just the extra kinestick. But what's really interesting about that, I've learned that Roger Moore in the late 80s was working for the CIA on the Iran-Contra project. Mm-hmm. Then in the early 90s, Roger Moore was working for the FBI and he was working on an operation they dubbed Operation Punch Out. And they were luring military men to sell stolen jet engines and military equipment to foreign governments. Well, it only makes sense to me that when that operation ended in the early 90s, that I don't see how Roger Moore just accidentally bumped into McVeigh at a gun show and they became buddies. McVeigh was staying at his house. There were letters read at trial from McVeigh and Moore to each other. There's just way more to it. And wouldn't that be awful if Moore was the government agent, that he supplied the detonators for the bomb?
It's unbelievable. And if a CIA or FBI connected person were in any way involved in the plot, that would kind of explain everything. It would explain why all the secrecy, why all the videos have been sealed, why all the witnesses have been ignored, and so much more. Well, thank you, Kathy, for joining me, and everyone should check out your new book, Shadows of Conspiracy, which just came out. Really appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
So there you have it. The truth about the Oklahoma City bombing is far deeper than we've been told. It seems Timothy McVeigh ticked off several boxes of the most common U.S. domestic terrorists: white, male, former military, white supremacist, and often has connections to the FBI or CIA. The most innocent explanation is that the FBI or CIA have undercover people or informants in just about every extremist organization in the country. So when one succeeds at a terror attack, it's always going to have some FBI, CIA connection, whether they tried to stop it or not. Or the more sinister explanation is that those two organizations further these horrible plots because they find it useful, either to stop the plot and look like heroes or to allow the plot, keeping the American population scared and malleable, like warm Play-Doh. The malleable part, not the scared part. Play-Doh's not usually scared, unless it knows what I'm going to do to it. That was gross. Jesus, Lee. Why cover this story 30 years after the attack? Because I don't understand people who don't want the truth. It's the truth. You should want the truth. I can handle the truth. You, Jack Nicholson. If you want to see my full 30-minute interview with Kathy Sanders, where she reveals so much more, become a member at leecamp.net or patreon.com/leecamp. And now, let's get to breaking the news. We all know quite well that the U.S. has been pivotal for Israel's ability to perpetrate their genocide in Gaza. Not only do we send them missiles, but we also send them missile-sized beer koozies to keep their missiles warm. But what doesn't get talked about nearly as much is the involvement of Britain, the UK, America's daddy, who birthed us from his loins. The UK hasn't done anything wrong, have they? I mean, they drink warm beer, which... so they wouldn't even know what a beer koozie is. But Britain is blameless in this thing Israel is doing. I mean, other than running around saying genocide is fine and good and proper, and arresting journalists like Richard Medhurst for reporting that genocide is, when you really study it, in fact, not fine and good and proper. So other than that stuff, Britain is not involved. Except for the 500 military flights they've sent over Gaza. But I'm sure the flights were totally for something wonderful, like dropping teddy bears down to the children of Gaza, or maybe the actors from Downton Abbey were paratrooped in to raise morale. So what was the reason? The flights have been shrouded in secrecy, raising concerns about whether British intelligence has played a role in Israeli military operations. Oh, top secret flights over Gaza. Well, then the Downton Abbey thing seems kind of unlikely. But maybe a clue to the purpose of these flights would be to look at when they are most prevalent. Is it just prior to teddy bears being found all over the place? Fingers crossed. The investigation found that the Royal Air Force conducted 24 flights in the 2 weeks leading up to and including the day of Israel's deadly attack on the Nuseirat refugee camp on June 8, 2024, which reportedly killed 274 Palestinians. Yeah, so they were helping to facilitate one of the largest massacres of a giant 18-month massacre? That's a whole bunch of awful altogether there. But yeah, they aren't involved. No. Meanwhile, nearly the entire British media establishment ignores this complicity in crimes against humanity. But one outlet, Declassified UK, is actually made up of real journalists. Not sure how that happened. Probably Keir Starmer let it slip through when he was busy getting his marching orders from the dark Sith Lord. You know, that guy always is like, meeting at 9 a.m. And you're like, oh, I'm barely awake. You know how it is. Anyway, a journalist from Declassified UK caught up with the head of the UK military, Admiral Sir Anthony David Radican.
Admiral Radican, Chief of the Defence Staff. Lovely to meet you today. I'm a journalist from Declassified UK. We've been trying for months to get answers about the Royal Air Force surveillance flights that you're sending over Gaza and the intelligence that you're sharing with Israel. Have you got any comment on those that you can give to us?
To a public accounts committee hearing, and I don't really have time for this conversation. Thank you.
There you have it. The head of the UK military cannot walk and talk at the same time. Feel like you might want someone smarter in that position. But luckily, there is no talking necessary when pushing buttons to kill children. Whoop. But you're going to love his answer to these next questions.
Do you have concerns about sharing intelligence with the Prime Minister of a country that's wanted by the International Criminal Court, Admiral? Is this why you joined the military, sir? Are you a disgrace to your uniform?
Don't answer that, Admiral! No, it's a trick! It's a trick! You're totally not a disgrace to your uniform, because the UK military, much like the US military, is mostly built on rape, pillage, death, destruction. So you're perfectly living up to that uniform. Most importantly, this reporter is being rude. Reporters are supposed to fawn over the powerful, shine their shoes, grovel at their feet, and gently scrub their supper buttocks. This reporter isn't supposed to ask this Sir Admiral Esquire guy tough questions about his complicity in genocide.
Do you have trouble sleeping at night, seeing the images coming out from Gaza? Do you routinely share intelligence with countries whose leaders are wanted for war crimes by the International Criminal Court, Admiral? Are you a participant in Israel's genocide, Admiral? Do you have blood on your hands, Admiral?
Whoa! That's not fair. He might have blood on his hands, but it might be from several other things the Brits are doing, such as helping make sure the proxy war in Ukraine never ends, or harvesting blood diamonds, or what have you. The blood dripping off him is not necessarily from Gaza, but it's also from Gaza. Yeah, totally. Anyway, I just found this whole exchange shocking. I think it's because I'm an American, so I've never actually seen what real journalism looks like. It's kind of scary. Like, there's a lot going on there. But maybe I'm being a bit harsh. Let's actually see how our U.S. journalists deal with the highest military official in the land, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth.
I'm grateful for every opportunity the president has given me.
And I was grateful to see the Hegseth army on the Easter egg roll yesterday in the backdrop. They are ready to go.
You've helped murder countless innocent people, and you've only been Secretary of Defense for like 50 days. Let's talk about that Easter egg hunt. And here are your headlines from the future. In 1 month, you'll read, U.S. Congress votes to pay off all of Israel's student loan debt. And who says Congress doesn't do anything? And coming up in 3 weeks, AOC abandons last remaining core value in hopes of one day becoming president of the remnants of the festering mountain of refuse called America. That's a woman who knows what she wants. And this August, you'll find out, new shitty AI replaces shitty human who is doing shitty job at shitty job. Wow, the future truly is a brave new world. And in September, a new Washington Post investigation finds multitasking is now the norm. 75% of Americans under 25 scroll TikTok while listening to one podcast in each ear and one in their butt. These kids these days, huh? That's the show. A new one airs every Thursday, so please make sure to subscribe. But we can only keep this show going with your help, and I'm giving away loads of free stuff. If you join up at leecamp.net or patreon.com/leecamp, you'll get both my ebooks and all 3 of my Zoom comedy specials that aren't available anywhere else. That's a $45 value for joining up for $6. Plus, exclusive segments like the full 30-minute interview with Kathy Sanders that you saw a piece of on today's episode. So join up at leecamp.net or patreon.com/leecamp. The revolution will have laughter. Keep fighting.